Okay, and you're probably still muted.
Oh, thank you. We will begin with a prayer and then chant.
Okay.
Okay. So let's welcome everyone. Let's begin together with a prayer. Heavenly Father,
Heavenly Father,
Divine Mother,
Divine Mother,
friend, beloved God,
friend, beloved God,
great masters of self-realization,
great masters of self-realization,
Jesus Christ,
Jesus Christ,
Babaji Krishna,
Babaji Krishna,
Lahiri Mahashaya,
Lahiri Mahashaya,
Swami Sri Yukteswar,
Swami Sri Yukteswar,
and Paramhansa Yogananda Ji,
Paramhansa Yogananda Ji,
saints of all religions,
saints of all religions,
friend and guide Swami Kriyananda,
friend and guide Swami Kriyananda,
we humbly bow to you all.
we humbly bow to you all.
Help us to open our hearts,
Help us to open our hearts,
to open our minds,
to open our minds,
to open ourselves
to open ourselves
to thy divine healing presence,
to thy divine healing presence,
and to share this presence
and to share this presence
with all.
with all.
Om.
Om.
Peace.
Peace.
Amen.
Amen. Sorry.
It's okay.
Reveal thyself, reveal thyself, reveal thyself, reveal thyself, reveal Sit up tall now for just a brief meditation. Diving deeply. Calling to the divine, reveal thyself, reveal thyself. Om Shanti Shanti. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. You're great soul.
Where's your other half? Kamala Devi. Shantala and Kamala Devi were two of the 7 who were in Australia, and they were together constantly.
Yeah.
So they came to class last night together.
Yeah. You are allowed to not go somewhere
You are
together. Yeah. Okay, well, welcome everyone to our last class, and welcome those watching the recording. It's been a joy. It's been such a joy to just focus each week on a different theme of what does it mean to spiritualize our relationships. So we thought that tonight we would just revisit each theme lightly and talk about how that provides a foundation for us in all of our relationships. And then also leave space for questions and answers, and go from there. So revisiting, so just as a reminder, our first week we touched upon life as a pilgrimage. That was our theme. And looking at when we hold our life with the context of pilgrimage, then whatever's happening in our relationships, there's an open receptivity to, that somehow to learn what is it that's being offered to us. So part of what we talked about is when we go on pilgrimage, very often there is a intention with pilgrimage to say to God, I give this trip to you. It's different than vacation, right? Which might be more, it's nothing wrong with vacation, but vacation might be more just
Vacating my life.
yeah, or just more about the self. It's just more the self going on vacation. This is something for me that I want and need to do. Whereas pilgrimage very intentionally is giving ourselves to God and the trip to God and asking that it deepen us spiritually through that practice. And so if we're looking at our whole life that way, then all of our relationships are part of that same thing. That somehow it's not out of order. And when we encounter a challenge in relationship, if we're relating to it as a pilgrimage, we're just asking deeper questions. We're relating to it in a deeper way. So the second week we talked about the theme of divine friendship, of what is that? And we read from the book about divine friendship of Swami Kriyananda, this passage of the highest ideal. Just imagine a friend who's never judging and always accepting and looking for our highest good and offering that to us. And there were some other just beautiful statements that was Swami, what he did and how he lived. And he set that high ideal for us to say, well, what is it? So, we spent the evening just talking about that, divine friendship. What does it look like? How do we practice it? In our third week, we revisited divine friendship and then looked at the many ways in which we have opportunities to practice it. Not just the obvious, like in our family or with close friends, but also people we work with, people we might bump into at the grocery store, someone, maybe I'm making a phone call to customer service, and how every encounter is an opportunity. And that is how Swami lived. That's what he did. He was everyone's divine friend, right? So we touched upon that last week. And then specific tools and practices of yoga, how they can support us in the practice of divine friendship. So this week, in bringing it all together, the theme is consciousness, and in particular, tending to our own consciousness, and how that supports us spiritualizing our relationships. So last week, one of the things we talked about is being resourced. And in particular, so what do we mean by resource? The being resourced spiritually. I used the image of a reservoir. So because that works well for me, as I imagine I'm filling up this inner reservoir of grace. And as that inner reservoir fills, then I have that grace to draw upon when I'm interacting with others. So, how do we do that? That's where we were talking about tools and practices. Sunday service comes to mind for me. I always feel that after Sunday service, my reservoir has been filled up. It's just very tangible for me how much more I have to just easily offer to other people. And in contrast to that, looking at when the reservoir starts to feel depleted. And, one of my guidelines for that is no lower than half a tank. So, and I remember this from emergency preparedness. They recommend always having at least half a tank of gas. And I feel like spiritually, it's good to have at least half a tank because I can get by with less. But it's a little tricky. You don't know how much you're going to need, right, in any given encounter. Some encounters are more demanding, more trying than others. And if my tank is always half full, then I'm giving myself the best I can for those interactions.
We might have said this last week, I don't remember, but it's important to hold that the trying relationships, there's kind of two different parts to that. One is sort of emotionally trying, where there's sort of interpersonal difficulties. But then there's the other kind, which we especially touched on, I think, in the first week, which is my consciousness is affected. There might not be anything wrong with the people. They might not.
Right.
The interpersonal part of those relationships might be perfectly fine. Mm-hmm. But I end up leaving, and I notice my consciousness is lower. Mm-hmm. So that's
that was something James and I were talking about before class tonight in terms of consciousness. And, we've seen it many times, and maybe you have too. It's been very true for me in the journey of yoga in particular, because yoga is looking at energy, looking at vibration, looking at consciousness, asking the question, where am I? Like the introspection practice, like where am I in my consciousness? And in particular, how's my energy? What's the quality of my energy? So in the book, The Art and Science of Raja Yoga, in talking about environment, Swami points out, and these are Master's teachings, that environment encompasses many things. Hi, welcome. So it's not just the physical space that we're in. That's the more obvious environment. And it is important. And Ananda makes, one of the practices of the yogic lifestyle is to tend to our physical environment. Just have it be uplifting as possible. And I'm now reminded of Swami talking about any item that you have in your home, photographs, pictures, anything that you have in the home. But in particular, this one, I don't know if it was a talk or something I was reading of his, but I've heard him say it more than once, that, he relates to his art as a friend, right? So the things that are in his home, so in terms of divine friendship, now I'm thinking of Amra and her work, in terms of the expression of art should be uplifting, right? It should be inspiring. And so the things in our home, we want, when we look at them, to feel a sense of that it's supporting us spiritually, right? And so this is a non-obvious way of environment, of how do the things in my physical environment support me? How does the food I eat impact my consciousness? And so again, he goes into detail about the gunas and talking about tamasic guna, rajasic guna, sattva or sattvic guna, these qualities of creation that can be found in everything, right? And so how they impact us. Well, in relationships is another, which is the emphasis of this class, of how do, as James is saying, how do my interactions and relationships with others impact my consciousness and my energy? So what I learned in yoga right away, one of the things I kept hearing repeated is my energy going in or out? And if it's going in, is it going down or up? And this is kind of simple way of working with it. I heard that, I'm going to borrow this. This is something I've practiced, and I heard Sai Ganesh led this in a class recently, so you may have very recently heard this example or seen this example. But one of the examples for experiencing this, I'm sitting forward in my seat, is to have a sense of how the physical body connects to consciousness, right? So the way that you practice, and I'm going to invite all of you to do this, is you slump in your seat, so you just kind of have a heaviness in your body, like heaviness, right? And then frown. Have a frown on your face, and just kind of really tune into a quality of heavy, down, burdened, experience. And as you're holding this position of the body and the frown on your face and these thoughts of heavy and down, say, I am positive and happy and enthusiastic. And try to do it without changing your facial expression. And then sit up and lift your arms wide and smile as broadly as you can, right? And say, I feel horrible. And it just makes you laugh because it's so difficult to do. We don't do that when we feel horrible. We don't do that, right? And when we're down, we don't say, I feel wonderful. So yoga's always working with our physical position of our body. Yogananda encouraged us to be smile millionaires, right? To smile all the time, because smiling, even just in the eyes, even if I'm not smiling in my face, it brings the energy here to the prefrontal lobes. And now science is demonstrating this. In a recent yoga class, I was talking about a scientific study, came out a few years ago, I'm not sure when, but they were looking at happiness and what stimulates it and what stimulates the prefrontal lobes, and they were talking about smiling. And it really stood out to me because of Yogananda's teaching, Be a Smile Millionaire. And they said even taking a pencil and putting it in your mouth and biting on it, right, actually has the same effect as smiling. So if it's difficult to smile, bite a pencil, right? And again, it's humorous, right? It's beautiful. And Yogananda said, if it's difficult to smile, go to a mirror and, like literally lift your face into a smile. So it's interesting that it matters that much. But in terms of consciousness, and to me, this is in relationship, it's a tricky thing, which is, as James was just saying, it's not The practice is, I guess what I'm trying to say, I'll just use this example. So I'm new to yoga, I'm learning these teachings, I'm practicing them. And I used to, James and I at this point were on the East Coast. I'd fly out to California, go to the Expanding Light, take trainings and classes, and go home and be applying them. And so I'm always paying attention to energy, right? That's why I had to do that practice. Where's my energy? I was always asking, right? And so I started noticing that when I would get together with some friends who I really liked, really enjoyed, afterward, I would notice very subtly I wasn't quite as inspired as I had been before. And that was odd. I'd never noticed that before. And I thought, oh, that's kind of strange. I mean, I noticed I felt more uplifted before I went to see them than I did after. And I thought, but we had such a nice time. It was really fun. And we laughed and told stories. And okay, I kept watching. And it repeated itself, right? And I thought, Actually, at first, I felt grief about it. I didn't really want that to be true. I mean, I like these friends, and gosh, what does that mean? Like, can't spend time with them anymore. It didn't mean that, but it did mean pay attention to your consciousness, and maybe don't spend as much time. And maybe begin to cultivate relationships where my inspiration doesn't drop. When afterward, it's at least the same, if not higher. Higher, that's nice. And so I started to do that. And what I found is one of the experiences I had at Ananda. So I began to spend more time with people who were practicing joy. Right, they just were. And I remember being at the Expanding Light, again, one of my early trips there. And there was a young man, I don't remember his name, I think he was in the Karma Yoga program. I think that's what it was. So we ran into each other and we both were beaming. I was just so happy. I loved being there. I felt like, where am I? What is this magical place where people just love God and they're so open-hearted about it? And so we saw each other and we both were grinning, and for no apparent reason, right? Just walking around smiling. And he said, isn't it wonderful to be someplace where you can just smile? And, it reminded me of being in New York and having someone say, when I was there doing some volunteer work, and I came from California, and anyway, I remember someone saying to me, what are you smiling about? And I was like, I don't know. I just felt like, do I have to know? Does there have to be a reason? So this idea of consciousness, of how do we know where our consciousness is? And that's one of the reasons I like the simplicity of, heavy, and and then broad smiling, arms expanded, but it's because it's a very tangible way of tuning in and asking the question, and also applying something as simple as standing up, right? Sitting up taller, which we talk about a lot, smiling, biting a pencil if I need to, or playing chant, or anyways, I think you get the idea. So this was our theme tonight of how to talk about consciousness and in terms of relationships. And if you have questions about that, right, or examples, or you can have a question from any of the classes. So that's kind of where I
the other thing I want to key on there is that when we are with other people, the consciousness of those that we are with is going to affect our consciousness, but our consciousness affects them as well. So it's a two-way street because we are in relationship. Our souls are in relationship with each other. The other thing is, just because I'm going to be in a group, and Chantal and I happened to be talking about work earlier today, and her experiences at work, and before I was working here when I was in the corporate world, and just being around people whose consciousness is different, and it's difficult sometimes. So it doesn't mean don't be around people, but we just have to be aware. And that's the first part of consciousness. In fact, that's a great word to use for consciousness is awareness.
Yeah.
Being aware of how do I feel before, during, and after, without judgment, just noting. And if I know I'm from past history that I'm going to be stepping into an interaction where there's a pretty good chance my consciousness is going to be challenged, then fill my reservoir as much as I can before that interaction, and make plans afterwards to fill my reservoir again, because that's going to serve me. Consciousness can be a very slippery slope, and this is the challenge. That if I'm surrounded by people who I enjoy, people who in the past I've always spent time with, but they affect my consciousness, they bring my consciousness down. You, in that example, you didn't, but you could have easily given in to, I'm just going to stay with them. And my consciousness may have a more difficult time rising afterwards. So this is what I mean by it can be a slippery slope. So again, awareness of what's happening in the shorter term, but also in the longer term, in the longer rhythms. What's happening with my consciousness? Not that we're measuring ourselves on the spiritual path. So this can, another helpful thing can be to have somebody to check in with.
Yeah.
Somebody who is a trusted advisor who can give us a sense of, you're doing really well, or so what's going on with you?
Right.
Or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And talk through what tools can I employ, perhaps? What people might it be better to be around less or be around more? There was a write-up that went around recently in the last few days that started from Shurjo and Narayani in India about how, and they were quoting Swami, but in particular Yogananda, of the importance of vibrations, and in the particular aspect of sound, and how important that is to our consciousness. Our relationships are equally as important, maybe not quite as equal, because Yogananda didn't talk about it in that way. But thinking
He did with satsang. He said
did
it's
with
the second.
satsang is right. So it's right
did
up there
talk
in
about
terms of affecting our consciousness. The satsang, whether we call it satsang or not, who do we spend our time with? And looking to them. That it's always a good idea. I think you were saying this when we were chatting earlier about spending time with someone or someones who have higher consciousness, who are further along the spiritual path. That's going to help magnetically draw me along.
It's very true. I mean, that's a yogic practice, right? To spend time. Yogananda said, keep the company of saints. So that can be people in a physical body who are, for me, my perception, they are, my experience, they're ahead of me spiritually. And so they inspire me, right? They, when I spend time with them, I do feel elevated. I remember there was a talk, again, I can't remember the talk reading how it happened of Swamiji, but him saying, don't let yourself be the most advanced spiritually in the company you keep. That's not a good idea. That, find someone ahead of you, right? That make sure you are, and I remember Asha saying something similar in a different way. She said, if she had this experience of living at the village for a while, and then she needed to go home I forget what the reason was, it doesn't really matter, but she noticed what is called the familial warmth. She was like, oh, this is kind of...
With her parents.
Yeah, with her parents, and settling in, and kind of felt comfortable, and she realized, I could stay, even though she'd been living for quite a while at the village. But at a certain point, there were two things that came to her. One, her divine friends at the village would not have gone for that. She's like, at some point they would have come and gotten me and said, what are you doing? Get out of here. This is not supporting your high spiritual aspirations. It's not a bad environment. And I think that can be the tricky part is with my friends, they're not bad people. It's like there isn't anything wrong with them. It's just asking, is it supporting my spiritual life, my highest aspirations? Making sure I have at least some connections that are doing that for me. And that's what was really standing out. So like with Asha, the thing she said too is, if you're the most evolved, so she just said a similar thing, you can start to feel, she said, you won't be motivated to grow. It's just very easy to become complacent and feel like, well, I guess I'm doing pretty good because I'm more, I'm going to put air quotes, spiritual. I mean, how do you evaluate that? All I can say is that I know what it feels like to be in the company. I would say it's the number one reason I live in spiritual community is because I feel the spiritual aspirations of everyone there. And that lifts my consciousness. It inspires me to keep going. And then at any given moment, this group, as James was saying, just came back from Australia. And listening to everyone speak last night, I was profoundly inspired by the willingness to say yes to a big trip, to do seva, to go there, and as each person was sharing, just accept the role that was presented to them in the moment without ego getting in the way, right? Just saying and even if you felt like, am I up for this, right? A willingness to do it anyway. And so I left feeling that was my example, right? Those are my friends who were showing me, reminding me of the importance of saying yes and the beauty that comes from that experience. Yeah.
Are there any questions?
And did you get the mic?
No.
Could you go do that? So ponder if you have a question, because it's really important for the recording to be able to record you. Just see if there's anything else. Okay, I'm going to look at my notes.
Now we have it.
Now you have it. Very good. That was quick. So any questions or comments about what we've said up to this point? And yeah. No, not yet.
I'm going to leave it.
Oh, yes. Good.
I came spontaneously tonight to the class, and I really appreciated your review, and already I feel like I've received so much, so thank you.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you, Amara. Yeah. I know, you're just holding it. No, it's so beautiful, and I was so happy to see you. Right, it was just so sweet that Letty and Amra, it's the joy of divine friendship. It's just completely spontaneous of, so I'm reminded of, I went to a gathering one time, and again, I'm speaking so much of Ananda. I mean, here we are at Ananda. It's my experience. I don't think it's the only way to have uplifted, inspired experiences. But in terms of learning and developing, I remember being at a gathering. Someone was having a birthday party, and it was within Ananda, and so it was just lovely. It was a lovely gathering, but it was one of the first times I had been at a social gathering. It wasn't here, so it was at someone's home, and it was so you kind of have. The scene was familiar to me because I'd been to other social gatherings, right? And so here we are. It was it was lovely how they did it, but these small tables of 4 to 6 people just having dinner together and chatting. And so there we are out in the backyard, and I'm sitting there, and I was just listening to the conversation, and it dawned on me something I just had never really thought of before, which is the vibration was a vibration that I could relax. So as I listened to the conversation, and it just one person shared about, I don't remember what anyone was saying, but what really stood out to me is I didn't have to work to keep my consciousness elevated. And I wasn't aware of how much I was doing that in other social gatherings. That I was, noting, not with judgment, but, let's say someone's talking about the news. And, like what's happening in these other social gatherings? Well, I'm not opposed to the news at all. I don't mind being informed, but I'm careful about it. I am. I'm careful about it and how I get it. And, so the point I'm making is I remember just kind of putting my hand on my heart and thinking, wow, this is really easy. Like, this isn't work, right? And it didn't mean I wasn't going to ever be at any other social interaction. But what James was saying, how do I stay fortified? And I had learned how to do that. And so much so that it was the norm. Like, okay, get yourself resourced. Be resourced while you're there, right? Get resourced again when you leave. And here I was at a social gathering getting resourced. I was like, oh, that's different. Because again, it wasn't Sunday service, it wasn't a class, it wasn't places I was used to getting resourced. And it really was the first time I ever felt spiritually resourced at a social gathering. Which doesn't, and a similar one I can tell you is our 4th of July pool party that we have. It's just such a delight. I mean, really, all these social things we do in the community, they're so joy-filled and fun. And they have an experience for my consciousness that's so relaxing. Whereas generally, outer activity like that can be quite depleting for me, right? And that's where, again, it seems like I'm having fun. Gee, it seemed like I was having a good time. I wonder why I want to go to bed, right? Why is it that I kind of feel exhausted, right? And in this, and I really do believe it's the consciousness of everyone is why. And I'm feeling it and experiencing. So let me just share this tool, because I'm talking about being fortified, and James was talking about being in workplaces. On our sheet, and if anybody needs a copy of it, we handed this out last time. This is Tools and Practices of Yoga. And these are kind of the basic, affirmations, pranayama, prayer and meditation, asana, satsang, environment, teacher guide, as James was saying. Have someone you can talk to when you're trying to make decisions. Chakras, sacred chants, and seva. These were the things we touched upon. So in my work environment, when I worked in an environment that was good work but not spiritually focused, I would have in my office, my desk had lots of affirmations, lots of quotes, lots of beautiful pictures, so that everywhere my eyes went, I felt uplifted. And I think I knew it was just something I had learned to do, so I was doing. Someone came to my desk one time and asked if they could use my phone, and I said, sure, go right ahead. I wasn't using it, so they sat at my desk. I was doing something else, and I came back, and she just said, wow. And I was wondering, what was she saying? She said, I've just been sitting in your office, and I feel so inspired. How could you not feel good after reading all these little happiness quotes? And I just started laughing. I said, well, I need that. And she said, yeah, you're giving me ideas here. So that is one of the tools that's helpful. So if you're in an environment that in and of itself, it isn't offering that to you, what can you put in the environment that lifts you and inspires you and reminds you? Another is I used to carry a little book of meditations, like daily reflections in my purse, or a little book of prayers. Have it handy. And in one of these classes, I was talking with a group about this topic, and was said that very often going to the restroom was like what saved me. Right? So I'd be in a public situation, maybe a social gathering, maybe work, something. And I'd feel like, okay, it's getting the better of me. It's getting the better of my consciousness. So I'd run to the restroom. And I'd go in the stall and I'd pray or say a meditation, or I'd read a little reflection, and I'd just wait until I felt fortified again. And in this particular group, the number of people that did the same thing, that I had no idea, right? And each was like, how do you take care of your consciousness? And at a certain point, I started laughing. I said, who knew that public restrooms were temples, right? How many people are going in there, right? And it's like, because no one else knows, and you're like praying and trying to get back to light. But it really helps, is what I found, is that it would bring me back to my center. And that's the key, is like feeling. James Lettuce was talking about Tadasana, I think that was last week, standing mountain pose. And then I had to stand up in that, of what does it feel like to be in our center? So that when I start to feel off center, I can catch it and go, oh, come back to center. What does it feel like when the energy's elevated versus down, right? And so I have some go-to affirmations. I'm positive, energetic, enthusiastic. I'm positive, energetic, enthusiastic. And if I need to do it with the arm movements, I'll do it with the arm movements. So some of you know those super conscious living exercises. I think I'll say one last thing about that, which is a story that Bhagavati shared. So she's part of the music ministry up at the Expanding Light. I was taking a class with her and Ramesha, and she was speaking of the power of the children's music in particular. And so, we hear all the time how important, that Swami, the music he wrote, what he said is he is channeling a consciousness, a vibration in that music. So she told the story. At the time this happened, she was living in the Palo Alto community, and she had to come here to the Sangha for something. And it was one of those days where a lot of things went wrong. So she was really in a crabby mood. She was just like grumpy, and so she got in her car, and she was very aware of being grumpy and didn't want to have to drive here, but had to do it. And so she's driving, and she thought, and it dawned on her, I have to learn that song. Some song they were going to be singing. So she thought, well, I'll just use the time to practice the song. So she's singing this little children's song, right? And those who know, how far away is it? How many minutes from the community?
10 minutes.
Yeah, it's like 10-minute drive, right, from there to here. So she's singing it. And she said she pulled into the driveway of the Sangha, and it dawned on her. She was so happy. She was so elevated. She's like, I was cheerful, right? And prior to that, she said she had the worst attitude, and she had every good reason to have a bad attitude, right? So she wasn't trying to check herself. She said, I did not do it to lift my consciousness. It did it for me. And she thought, wow, okay, I've always known the songs were powerful. But so that's just a lovely story of tools of how to do it and how helpful it can be.
I'm struck with, as we're talking about this sense of what kind of bringing it back to relationships, the sense of boundaries. Do I need to put boundaries in place? Do I just need to be aware that, okay, well, this is a picket fence boundary so we can have a conversation, or this is a high wall boundary of, do not come into my space kind of a boundary, depending on who the person is that we're in a relationship with. And I'm just thinking about, many of us live or do a lot of interaction with the community that we have, which is, in the way Swami Kriyananda has talked about it, is a modern-day 21st century ashram. The ashrams of older ages, from centuries before, and both in India and in the West with the monasteries, and is a cloistered life where the literal high walls are the boundaries to keep all of life away. That in that sense, controlling consciousness to the best that they could, in particular with their relationships and with their environment, through these high walls. But in this age of energy, in this modern age, that's not realistic. And so what we are tasked with doing is having these boundaries that are not physical boundaries, they are energetic boundaries. And intention, which is something we have, I don't know if we've used that word, but our intentions are an important part of that. So if the intention is, I want to keep my consciousness lifted, then I can think about, because if this is an important intention of mine, I can think about, okay, what interactions am I going to be having over the next period of time, whatever that may be, the next hour, the rest of the day, and so on. And I can resolve things accordingly. Now, as many of us know, one of those formulas that Yogananda came to us with is the greater the willpower, the greater the flow of energy. The greater the flow of energy, the greater the magnetism. And we use that magnetism not just to attract things like Guru and Guru's grace, but we can also use it to repel things that don't serve us. But it takes energy. And to use that energy consciously, because I have the strong intention of keeping my consciousness lifted in this example, and that comes from my willpower. So I have to engage my will, and that's really what intention gets to. If I hold the intention to have a strong flow of energy, to keep my consciousness lifted. Now, as I'm with people who I am on a spiritual journey with, then that's a good thing, to hold my consciousness. If we each do that, then we, in this space here right now, and whoever is watching this online, if we're all doing this together, then all of our consciousness can be lifted with this interaction. But if I find myself, I'm at the coffee shop or the grocery store or the workplace or whatever it might be, then lovely people, my consciousness can take that hit. So I go in with that intention, with my willpower and that energy. And this is a great practice, not just because it's going to help my consciousness in the moment, but this is the key to self-realization, to bringing all of that energy inward and upward, like you were saying before. That's how we get to that point of self-realization. So that these interactions that we have with people become a practice, become a sadhana practice. This is how sadhana is. Yes, it's very important that we have a sadhana on the meditation mat when we're doing our yoga postures, when we're meditating, and all of those parts of that sadhana. But our interactions with people can be a sadhana as well. So I was just struck with that sort of
I think it's
juxtaposition.
It's beautiful. You're reminding me of a few things. One is Swami talking about, I can't remember the person's name now, who lived at Mount Washington, one of the monks, who left Mount Washington because there was another monk who drove him crazy. Right, so some of them may remember the name, so he left, and I think the person who was driving him crazy was named Jerry, and so Jerry was driving him crazy. He left. Later, this man saw Swamiji, and he said, "Remember how much Jerry drove me crazy?" He said, "I left. I found 6 Jerrys." Right? It's like my next job had 6 Jerrys, meaning he couldn't just escape the challenge that was being brought to him. And it takes deep discernment. I'm going to come back to what you were talking about of having someone to help you evaluate. Is this a challenge that's worthy of my energy? Should I be really trying to work with this? I had shared a story last week of, an experience in which I was going to really try and hang in there. And it was a mentor that said to me, "Is that a good choice for you? Is this a good choice to do that?" And it hadn't even occurred to me to not do that. But as she asked that question, I could see the value of what she was saying. that someone had really behaved so poorly toward me that it wasn't a good idea for me to stay engaged. That wasn't the right choice, and I didn't need to. But really, the truth is it was ego that was having me stay engaged. It wasn't a higher calling to do it. But I needed a mentor to help me see that, because it wasn't obvious to me. And it reminded me today, I was reminded of, how you can't always tell. So I had been teaching a yoga class, and afterward, one of the students was talking with me about relationships and yoga tools for working in relationships, in particular for her, working with her in-laws. And she was finding it difficult, and they were coming for a visit, and she was just asking about that. And I had just gone to talk to Asha, and we shared in the first class that one of the decisions James and I made after both his parents passed was a realization we needed to dedicate ourselves more completely to Ananda. Because now the parents on both sides are gone, and we felt like our duty, there was an obligation that felt right to us to be really involved in the family up until then. So you can hear the recording on this, but I'm just touching upon. So anyways, in part of our discernment of this, I went and talked to Asha about it to make sure I was making the right choice. It felt right, but it's a big decision to step back, right? And so Asha asked me, she said, well, what does James want? And I said, well, James is really pretty clear. He feels like he wants to spend more time with Ananda.
And in regards to spending time or not spending time with my family.
Not spending time with his brothers and sisters, right? Like not rejecting them, but the truth is it was hard on his consciousness. And he felt like he needed now to dedicate himself, his energy to. So she said to me, as his wife, if he wanted to be involved with his family, then I would tell you it's important for you to support him as his spouse, as long as you can do it, without your consciousness being compromised. You need to take care of yourself. But if it was important to him, then I would say it's important to support that. But it isn't. It's his family, it's his birth family, and he's telling you, no, that isn't where he wants to spend his time. Right. Now, the other thing she said to me, which really shocked me, which Asha can do, she has a great talent for that. She said,
in a good way.
In a good way, very good way. She said, they have no interest in you. And I know she could see the surprise of like, what? On my face. And she said, well, I'm not saying they don't want to spend time with you. She said, but do they ask you about your life and what is important to you and how you spend your time? Do they seem interested and engaged in what really matters to you? No, that's not what we talk about when we're together. It isn't like the family, that isn't what the family talks about. They talk about world events or other things, and that was part of it. We were always accommodating to join the group. It was fine, but at this time, not. So Asha just said, she challenged me, is what she did. She challenged me and said, if being with them depletes your consciousness and compromises your spiritual life in any way, and your husband is saying he doesn't want to spend a lot of time with them, then I wouldn't spend a lot of time with them, right? So, okay, that was actually, and this is, I think I may have mentioned this, I'm not sure, but with Teacher Guide, one of the things I've learned over time is in consciously practicing cultivating my intuition, I often find that when I go for counsel, it very often is affirming the messages I'm already receiving in meditation, right? So what Asha said, I was receiving that in meditation. But egoically, family was so important to me, and I just love the idea of family. I just it was hard for me to let that go, right? And so when she said that, even though it was surprised me, I could feel a deeper truth of it. So I was glad I talked to her, and it helped me. But here's the interesting thing. So I'm talking to this student. She's struggling with her in-laws. She's asking me about it. How can yoga help? And so I was talking about similar things, tools you can use for your consciousness and be a divine friend, those kinds of things. But I mentioned, right, that my experience with Asha, and her eyes lit up, and she said, maybe I should talk to Asha, right? And I said, I think it's a good idea. I go, I always think it's a good idea. And she said, yeah, I'll talk. I said, that's a great idea. Talk to Asha, see if she can help you, right? So she did. She came back when I saw her the next week for class. She said, well, I talked to her. I go, how'd it go? And she said, Asha said to me, well, how small do you want to be? Whoa, that was a different answer, right? And she's like, why avoid a challenge? Why do that? Complete opposite guidance that she gave me. And that's how, it's not cookie cutter. What's the right choice here, right? Yeah, how small do you want to be? And I thought, oh my gosh, isn't that interesting, right? That's the point, that in our journey is to try to find the resonance of truth for yourself. Some challenges are very important for us spiritually. And Yogananda often said, he used this example of a boxer in the ring, right? He said, pick a stronger boxer than yourself to box. Don't box somebody who's got your same strength, right? Because how are you going to grow? How are you going to develop, right?
I'm cracking up over here because this is exactly what Chantal and I were talking about today.
Really?
I'm gonna retell the story. It's my story, so I don't have to ask permission. But you have to bear with me. When I was working in this company in San Francisco, and we were already living here at Ananda in Palo Alto, and I had to constantly do a lot to keep God present for me. Mm-hmm. They were fine people, all the things that we're kind of saying here, but they weren't on a spiritual path. They weren't interested in God. But I had to do a lot of things. Now, fortunately, it was an hour drive getting up there in San Francisco, so I got to hear lots of talks. I got to do lots of chanting, lots of music, all these things, all these yogic tools that we're talking about. So it was very helpful in that regard. And then, time goes on, and eventually I leave that company and I start working here. And it was suddenly very easy. I didn't have to do all of those things. And the analogy that I was sharing with Shantala was that when I was working in that office up in San Francisco, it was like a swimmer who trains by swimming in the ocean. Mm-hmm. And they're having to battle the currents, the waves, and the seaweed, and the wind, and the seagulls, and everything. It's hard. And now, that's what was happening to me up there. Now, suddenly, I'm swimming in a swimming pool. And the water is heated, and it's easy gliding, and I can go super fast, like, oh, this is so great. But here's the thing. Part of why it was so great, the boxer analogy is perfect for this, is because I put so much energy and intention on bringing God with me to the workplace up there, that it was just a natural thing for me when I came here. God was all around me when I started working here at the Sangha, but I also brought all of those practices that by then were just sort of subconscious of bringing God with me, of constantly continuing to play chants, continuing to play talks, and all of those same tools were still, but I didn't have to do it to fill an empty reservoir. Mm-hmm. So we were just...
Well, and it's so interesting because, again, just discerning for yourself, and part of it is when Swami has said, if you're trying to figure out your Dharma, just look what's in front of you. Like, it doesn't have to be really complicated, but it doesn't mean you'll always have an automatic answer. But whatever's in front of you, to be discerning about how can I, from a spiritual perspective, relate to it, right? So from that perspective, from that context, so I'm not simply relating to likes and dislikes. That's one of the things we really work with, right? It's natural to have them, but I don't want that to be guiding my choices. And I can certainly say I don't want that to be the only thing guiding my choices. Right, so I don't have to choose everything I dislike. in order to be spiritual. Okay, well, let me pick everything I don't like.
This will be a good test.
Yeah, this will be a good test. And again, now Asha's coming to mind again, but she laughs at herself for the things that she came up with. But her trying to figure out the spiritual life early on, she had a friend who she loved. It was so easy to be with. And just the amount that she loved this soul friend is, Chantal was laughing knowing the story, right? It just was, dramatic. And then she had someone else she couldn't stand, right? That it was really difficult and really drove her crazy. And she thought, boy, she dislikes this one, as much as she loves the other one. So she'd been pondering how to navigate that, and she came up with what she thought was a brilliant idea. So she'll like the one she likes less. I'll start liking them less.
And
so
spending less time with them.
Yeah, spend less time with them and even it out. So then it won't bug me so much, the person I don't like. Because she felt like it's the contrast. That's what it is. It's that I love this friend so much. So then I
love them too much.
Yeah, I love them too much. So it just makes me dislike the other one more. Swami was like shaking his head. And I think he said to her, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And then he said, a friend, a divine friend, someone that you have such good feeling with, it's a gift. And you should cherish that. Cherish that. Don't spend less time with them. Don't like them less. Don't try to squelch those feelings. That's not the answer, right? You do need to find a way to work with the challenges of the other. You do need. But the answer is not to love someone else less. That is not the answer. You need to use yogic tools and practices to navigate the difficult relationship. Right? You do. So he was challenging her in that way. Like, okay, it might be harder, but, for heaven's sakes, do not deny yourself the blessing of a really good friend. So, needing counsel to know what's the right way to handle things. It's just, what Asha points out, the things we come up with, they might not be wisdom, right? So to have someone in your life who can help you discern that. You reminded me also, James, when you were talking about magnetism. So this formula that Yogananda gives us, of the greater the will, the greater the flow of energy. The greater the flow of energy, the greater the magnetism. So it draws, in terms of our consciousness, it becomes a magnet. And so that's part of a tool we haven't, I think, talked about is attunement. And so I think it's within the things we're talking about, but it feels like a good moment to key in on attunement. So in terms of vibration, what am I attuning myself to? And because that's, as my energy, to have strong energy and to, strong will, strong energy, strong magnetism, that does not equal elevated magnetism. So just being magnetic doesn't mean that I'm positive. I could be negatively magnetic, or so again, back to this idea of environment. What am I eating? What am I reading? Who am I spending time with? But Yogananda used it like a radio channel. And he said, imagine you're tuning into a channel, and that channel has a vibration that will influence the magnetism. So to be conscious of not just have strong energy, not just have strong willpower, but have a quality of your consciousness. So I wanted to mention that, but a story comes to mind about this. I was listening to Lakshmi give a class on magnetism, and I somehow it just stood out to me in a much clearer way how she talked about it. And she was sharing this idea of likes and dislikes, and she said, for herself, she and her sister, just one of the interesting things they both, I think, have always noticed is that Lakshmi loves the ocean, and loves being at the ocean, and just, lifts her energy, inspires her. She just thrives at the ocean, and her sister's the opposite. He doesn't want to be at the sand. Like everything Lakshmi loves about it, her sister dislikes about it, right? She's like, how we can be sisters, but they're just very different in that way. So what Lakshmi said is she always assumed it was the ocean that lifted her energy. It was being at the beach that was what brought her joy. I mean, it seemed obvious, right? She loved being there, and when she was there, she was joyful. She said she loved it so much that when she knew the family was going to the beach, she'd wake up happy. Like she'd jump out of bed, right? Just, I can't wait to get there. And then one day it occurred to her. Now, I don't know when this occurred to her. It could have been after she learned the teachings of yoga, I'm not sure. But what she realized is that it actually wasn't the ocean that brought her joy. It wasn't that.
Because it wasn't bringing it to the sister.
Didn't bring it to the sister. This is something Swami said, which is that, if the outer reality is what causes joy, we'd all feel it. But likes and dislikes show us that it isn't the outside thing. We're not all in agreement of what tastes good. We're not all in agreement of what color do we like, right? So it's an internal, subjective reality. I like this, I don't like this. Well, what Lakshmi noticed is the reason that she felt so much joy going to the ocean is that she really liked it and put out a lot of energy to do it. And it was this combination, it was effortless, but the willpower to get ready to pack her bags. Like, as a kid, she in the morning didn't like to get up, wanted to sleep in, not on the day going to the beach, jump out of bed, get all her things ready. She's the first one. When are we leaving, right? So she put out so much energy and directed her will so clearly. And that occurred to her. It's that which is bringing me joy. It's that which makes the experience of the ocean, something I really like, so much bigger because it's a flow of energy. So, how does that tie into this? You reminded me of
It ties
intention.
Intention, but it's a really nice tool, and I'm just thinking about, for us in a partnership relationship, that if I had a hard day, doesn't matter how or why, but if I'm aware and I'm conscious of it, then I can turn to my partner and basically ask for help. And maybe I'm specifically asking, hey, can you help me? I had a hard day. Or maybe it's just, I know something that I'm going to like. It's like, can we just snuggle on the couch tonight? Can we just have some time here? It's like, let's not get on our screens and just have some face-to-face time. We do this all the time. That when we can ask for something that we know is going to help us. Maybe it's because I like it. Maybe because I know I have from past experience it's going to be helpful. It doesn't matter. But that can help lift my consciousness.
Yeah, putting out the energy. I think that's what...
Exactly.
So you're reminding me, I remember, at a talk Jyotish and Devi were giving, and they were talking about relationships and leading a yogic lifestyle. And Jyotish shared this story. He said, in partnership, it's very important to give energy to the partnership. Now, I will say the same about good friends. Similar to what Swami said, that it's a gift, it's a blessing to have this. And there's a certain disrespect of the gift you've been given if you don't give it energy, if you don't give it time. Now, what that looks like, what it needs to look like, that's discernment for you to know. But Jyotish shared this story. He used this example. He said at one point, and their life still is very much this way, he and Devi were teaching constantly, serving together constantly. So they were with each other every day and spending much of the day together doing this, right? And at a certain point, Devi said to him after one class they had taught, they came home, she said, we need to spend more time together. He was shocked. He was like, all we do is spend time together. But then he said he realized, he knew what she meant. Not just serving, not just giving, not just doing what we're doing, which is so good for us and we're happy to do, but she was saying we need quality time. That's just our time together. And so he was talking to the couples and saying, be attentive to that. right? Just be aware of it. And he wasn't giving a formula. He wasn't saying it should be this much and that's what's right. Every couple, everyone's different. Find it for yourself. Well, it really stood out to me. And so what's happened at various times, but I would say a year or so ago, maybe 2 now, I had this experience where I was feeling like our couple relationship, our partnership was needing more energy, more nourishment, more time. And I brought that to James and said, I need us to carve out, I didn't know what it was going to look like exactly, excuse me. But I said, I'm needing this. And now I will say it's not an easy thing to ask for. So we've been married a really long time. And it can seem like, why isn't that an easy thing to ask for? I don't know, but it just isn't. It's not easy. It's vulnerable. It's selfish, is what I was feeling. Like it's kind of selfish, right? To say, I want our time, no one else's time. Right? And I was really feeling it. So I talked to James about it and said, and I had learned this from the past, that if we don't schedule it, it just so often won't happen. And especially in Life with Ananda, which I love so much. But my goodness, this community has things going all the time. And I remember now, I'm reminded of Kamaladevi. I think she'll appreciate this if she ever hears this. But early on, me living here, she said to me one time, some event I had gone to, and she had decided not to. I can't even remember which one of us went or didn't go. But we were talking about it, and she said, whenever I tell myself I'm going to pass on something, like I just need to not do that. I've done 10 other things, whatever it is. Inevitably, every person I talk to afterwards says, it was the most amazing gathering. We all had such a wonderful time. And she and I laughed. It's like, it always is that way. So you're trying to decide, can I do it? Am I up for it? So I was saying to James, if it's not scheduled, there for sure will be something that sure seems important and valuable. So we looked at our week and looked at our time and when could we do it? Mostly, not always, but mostly Sunday afternoon can be our time. Where, we're finished with whatever, and it might not start till 2 or 3, and really it's not a long time. Maybe we'll go for a drive, go for a hike somewhere, but it's amazing how nourishing it is. It's so nourishing, and for me, it feels very special. And I need that, to just honor I have an ego, right? I need it. I need that special our time. And I was so grateful for Jyotish and Devi to say that, right? So that I could draw upon that. James very sweetly, after we'd been doing it for a few months, and then we're out on a drive, and I think I was just saying, thank you. This is really important to me. I know we're not really doing much. It's not a whole lot to write home about, but somehow it really is making a difference. And James said, it was your idea, but I appreciate it too. I want you to know this isn't just for you. I'm not just he said, I'm doing it for you, yes, but I get a lot out of this too. And he said, I've actually been enjoying telling people, oh no, Vivekadevi, it's our date. It's our date time. Yeah, Sunday afternoon.
Our date night,
It's
Sunday
our
afternoon.
date. Yeah, Sunday afternoon date night. But I'm mentioning it because of putting out energy. Mm-hmm. Right? It's just the intention. I think I said this maybe in our last class, but one of our classes, we made a commitment to each other to give the relationship our best. That doesn't mean that we aren't tired sometimes. Best can look different depending on the day, right? Best may not look all that great, but are we still giving our best? The point is that we aren't just collapsing energetically at the end of the day and saying, well, because we're so familiar with one another and, we're committed to each other, so I don't have to. Now, I don't think either.
It's a safe place, so.
It's a safe place.
Leave me alone.
Right, yeah. I mean, it seems silly, right? It wouldn't be a conscious thought, but.
Well, sometimes it was.
Self-honesty, non-lying.
Did I just out myself?
It's very tempting, right? It's just very, very tempting to feel like, okay, I've given everything else my best. I don't have anything left to give, right? Well, even if that's true in terms of energy, there's something, it's subtle, it's small, but even the thoughtfulness of saying, I'm tired. I mean, it happens. So as much as James, it happens frequently, where at the end of the day, and either one of us teaching at night or something, we come home and there's just not a lot there. We're kind of spent. It's been a beautiful, wonderful day, but not a time to have a rich conversation, right? Like, it's just not there. And so, so sometimes James will say, well, I can listen. I can't talk, but I can listen. And sometimes I just need to talk. I say, okay. Well, I said, can I tell you about my day, or can I tell you whatever? Yeah, you can tell me, right? And but he'll just say to me, I can't comment much, right? I won't have much to contribute back, but that's all right. Yeah, that's all right. I mean, as much as on other days, other times, I would ask very specifically, when James was saying, like, he might come to me and say, can you help me with this? I absolutely do that with James, where I will say, can I talk through something with you? And then we need to figure out when. Because if it's the end of the day and he's tired, I can see the little bleary eyes, like, oh, I can listen, but I can't really guide you today. I can't draw upon that grace. How about tomorrow? How about whenever? So I don't know, it might sound silly, but it's really worked for us to set the intention of an appointment. Right? And like make an appointment and say, okay. And for me, it's worth it if I really need to talk about something. Now, yeah. So,
it's not that everything is appointed.
no, it's
Just
not.
to be clear about that.
It's really not. Mostly it's spontaneous.
You know, the whole idea of bringing our best to the relationship, and I want to go back to the idea that human love, in particular, and this goes back a little bit to being a divine friend, human love is a way to sort of, as recognizing the divine within each other, that we are practicing, in a manner of speaking, the love for God. And so we started off in the very first week with life as a pilgrimage, because that relationship that we have with God is first and foremost for those of us on the spiritual path. And so everything else can remind us of that, can be a practice for that, can just keep bringing that back, that number one relationship can keep bringing us back to that. I can have a number two relationship that's very close to that, but it's meant to, in this way, it is meant to mimic that, the divine love, and eventually recognizing God is in my partner. God is in my closest friends, who are as close to that number one circle as we can be.
What you're reminding me of is, I touched upon earlier of the group that just came back from Australia, right? That when, so I'll say it in this way. There's kind of with James and I in our coaching practice, when we've worked with others, and when we used to have a coaching practice together, now we still occasionally will work with others together, which we love. It's beautiful. But in the coaching practice, because it didn't emphasize necessarily a spiritual life, it was more about, in general, helping someone find joy and fulfillment in their journey. And then, yes, if it was spiritual, we'd support that, definitely. But the reason I'm mentioning it is that the importance of what we do to nourish ourselves brings nourishment to others. And we talk about that a fair amount here at Ananda, that when any one of us goes away on pilgrimage, everyone's blessed by that effort that's put out, the energy that's put out for that has a way of blessing all of us. So in our partnership, when I'm observing James tend to his spiritual life, he recently went on a week-long seclusion, and it's recommended that we, have seclusion in our life. Whether it's an annual, weekly trip, just find a way to do that. I take a day each week to do that. I was so not just pleased for him, which I was, but I benefited from that choice, from that commitment. So so we are talking about life as a pilgrimage and spirituality and being spiritually focused. Also, doing things that inspire you and bring you joy and uplift you. They may not be specifically, obviously spiritual, but we would definitely talk to partners about how are you cultivating joy in your own life? Because the more joyful you are, the more joy you bring to your relationship. And if you can find it yourself and support it in one another, it will bless your partnership. It fills the reservoir and makes it easier. Early on in our relationship, it played out in ways of James likes sports. All right. I mean, I liked sports to a certain amount. I didn't like them as much as he did. So I made an effort, right, to learn the sports. Well, what is it, right? And I still have, just for nostalgia, I have this newspaper article James cut out our first year married that explained football. And it was like, we both laugh about this, the first down, the fourth down, it wasn't making any sense to me, and I'm like, I don't get it. Why is it a first down? It's supposed to be a fourth down, right? It's just so silly, but why did I care? Because he did. Why did it matter? Because it mattered to him. And learning how to, and as James said early on, spirituality still is for me my number one. He would do things for me, right? If it wasn't for him, if he didn't, I remember sometimes we'd go to church and afterwards I'd say, wasn't that inspiring, right? And I could see he's like, it's okay. He didn't want to bring me down by saying, well, not exactly, but he very honestly would say, I enjoy how inspired you are. Yeah. Right? Because what do you do in that moment? And that was true. He said, I enjoy how inspired you are. And then I could stay inspired, right? I didn't have to let mine drop because it wasn't inspiring for you. He said, it wasn't. But it's okay. I didn't go for that reason. I didn't go to be inspired. I went because it's important to you. I didn't mind it. He said, I didn't mind it, right? Okay. All right. And then I might say, can I tell you one thing that really inspired me about it? Sure, go ahead. So he'd listen, right? And that was supporting each other, right? And, miraculously, for heaven's sakes, who knew? Something greater understood, that our life would be more aligned spiritually now. But so we had to figure out before that happened, right, how to nourish and nurture the relationship. And so all of our relationships, I guess I'm mentioning this because James is talking about intention. It's a blessing to be in relationship. It's a blessing. And Asha very much is coming to mind to me tonight. But, she talks about, for most of us, we need interpersonal relationships. We need them. Very few of us have either the karma or the constitution to live as hermits. That it really takes a very special place in the journey for that to be a good choice for us. She said it can be attractive, right? Because James talked about in previous ages, the monastery, the high wall, right? You're only with people who are like-minded. You're not out in the world. It's harder to be out in the world. But it gives us lots of opportunity for growth. Lots of opportunity to know our own selves. What is the challenge I'm facing? Why is it a challenge? Not to do, and I talked about this before, Swami said, don't go looking for difficulty. Don't pick difficult relationships. And I will say, it's not that I picked them, but I used to feel like I wanted every relationship to be harmonious, that it took me a while to understand, right? Because James said magnetism attracts and repels. Let someone opt out, like of not wanting to connect with me, of not wanting to be close, of not, if I felt disharmony, I would feel like, what can I do to change that? How can I make the connection between us harmonious? And I had to learn to, before I do that, I love harmony, but to give someone space, right? And that can include someone really not liking me. I don't experience that a lot, but I have experienced it. And let it happen. They have figured something out, is what I trained myself to say. Oh, they have figured out that we're not very compatible, right? Just bow with gratitude that they have discovered something you haven't yet. So let them have space. It's a small thing, but it was a learning for me. It really was a learning to say, just pay attention, be sensitive to the flow of energy with yourself and with others. Mostly, it's a good idea to be cultivating harmony. Yes, mostly that's a very good objective to have, intention to have, but not to force anything. I think that's really what I'm saying, is to recognize the difference. Am I making something work? Am I making something happen? Versus allowing it to not, allowing it to be informing me. Maybe this has run its course and finished now, and to find peace with that. So, yeah, I'm not sure if there's any questions, comments?
Yeah, because I apologize for having been on my phone, but I was looking to see if anyone had chimed in.
Yeah, I had looked earlier and no.
So,
Question, comment?
It's everything of what you guys are talking about tonight is things that David and I have been talking about just this past weekend.
Okay.
Of our relationship with each other.
Yeah.
And just what a blessing it is that that we've brought each other to this point of where we are.
Wow.
And like he was mentioning his relationship with Asha and his relationship with the Sangha, the community, just everything that he's in right now. And he mentioned my being with the school and where I am and all of that. And I was saying, well, I feel like a lot of my progression is because I'm married to you and just my placement and everything. And, he kept reminding me that we're with each other and that we've both helped each other to get where we are.
Right.
And we have talked, it would be much easier to be separate from each other because then we don't have to constantly put in that effort to work on ourselves or to work with another person, but that's all relationships.
Right.
And I'm not proud to say this morning I was upset when I went into work and I was in a mood that just would not shake. And I went in, I'm like, okay, this is what's happening. And I went in and I was like, no, everyone's in their classes and doing whatever they're doing, so they're not even going to notice me. And I went and sat at my desk and I opened my laptop and I started working. And Keshava is sitting with his group of students at the table and they're singing along to the oratorio, preparing for our concert coming up soon. And because they're all singing along, I immediately started singing along because I love the songs.
Wow.
And it immediately just changed my energy and attitude. And I had a nice talk with one of my colleagues during that time. And just everything just seemed to change.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's beautiful. It's beautiful. Thank you, Letty. Yeah. It's incredible, the blessing, right? And it's I love when it happens in a surprising way, right? That there's something just extra special about that, of I wasn't trying to uplift my consciousness. I'd kind of settled, with Bhagavad Gita, right? I kind of settled into not being in a good mood. I couldn't shake it, I'm not going to try, right? And then it happens, right, through music, which is, so sweet, so sweet. Any other questions or comments? Yeah,
One small comment.
yeah.
Today morning I had woken up and I went to the group meditation, and in the meditation there was just something difficult that I was giving to God, and I was just working with it, and I was like, okay, I'm working with it. Okay, there is still some more, but I need to get up and go now. Maybe it'll take some time of the day. I'll just carry it with me, and God is with me. So that's what I was doing. I was walking, and as I was just crossing the, I don't know what it's called, just up the stairs, I saw Lakshmi was getting into her car, and she just turned and smiled at me, and I smiled back, and I was completely all fine.
Wow.
The whole thing went away, and I was, oh my God, I didn't need all the time that I thought I needed.
Wow.
And it was just beautiful that what you were talking about, the smiling and the relationship, and
Yeah.
there is so much that we exchange with one another
Yeah.
and uplift.
Yeah, it's beautiful, Shantala, and you're reminding me too, because we talked about this last week of bringing joy, right? And so, like the way Lakshmi just, sounds like brought joy to you in the smile. The power, if you've ever had this experience where someone smiles at you, you're out and about. And because we've been talking a lot about living in spiritual community, which is, I have to say, wonderful, right? But the experience of how simple that is to offer that when you're out and about in the world. And if anyone's ever offered it to you, right? And it's such an incredible small thing. I love you saying like, oh, I thought it was going to be an all-day project, right? But just like keep giving it, keep lifting the consciousness. It's like, it could be that simple, right? But there is something to, and again, the blessing of interacting. So to see each person, and this is the teaching, it's not limited to yoga, the teaching of to relate to others as your own self, right? To love thy neighbor as thyself in yoga, because thy neighbor is thyself, right? We are one. And to have that sense of, it's helped me a lot because I do love solitude. So it's helped me a lot to recognize it's a blessing to be in the company of others. I also really love people, so that helps. But I had a friend, I was reminded of this, who said to me, a friend from Ananda, she said, it's easy to be a saint when you live alone. Right? No, it can still be challenging, I'm sure. But what she was talking about is, relationships can be demanding and challenging, right? Letty's nodding, yes. But it doesn't make them wrong. It doesn't make them wrong. And that was really her point, is just because they're demanding and challenging, it doesn't make it wrong, right? More often than not, it's a good thing to have the challenge. Of course, we want, we don't want to be challenged. We don't want to swim in the ocean constantly forever and never get to swim in the pool. But it just helps, in my experience, it helps to say, how is this an opportunity? How is this a blessing? What is being given to me in this moment? What can I bring to this moment? And that intention, that willpower, that commitment, that transforms my consciousness. So whatever happens as an outer result, I am being spiritualized in the process through that intention. And then the interactions have more likelihood of being positive that way. So I think that's it.
Well, certainly we're out of time.
We're okay. So we'll close as we usually do, sending out light. So just taking the blessing of our time together, the blessing of these teachings, the gift of satsang, and visualize yourself as a channel of light and peace and joy. Setting the intention to share that light, to share that peace, to share that joy. with everyone. We'll rub our hands together. Whoops.
We mute it.
Oh, it's the it's the handheld. Yeah, that's okay.
If you mute it,
It's
it'll-
fine, honey. It's fine. Yeah. Rub our hands together. Draw energy and light and joy into the hands. Raise them and chant Om 3 times. Om. Peace. Amen. Okay, dear friends, so good to be with you. Thank you for coming. Yeah, blessings to you. Until next time. Yeah.